Boy, was this a wild weekend for the Detroit Pistons. You got a new head coach. You got a trade happening. You had a free agent signing happening. And it sounds like there's even more still to come. We're going to break all of this stuff down that happened over the past weekend, over the last 3 or 4 days in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs have winded down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Today, you'll hear more about them a little bit later. Last few days have been crazy. I haven't recorded an episode since Friday. That was the last episode we had with Bryce Simon. Last episode we had. And that day, they made the trade for THJ. But in that episode, we didn't really touch on that trade a lot. We touched on it a little bit. We didn't really touch on it a lot, though. After that, the Pistons hire a new head coach. They have JB Bickerstaff, former Cleveland Cavaliers head coach. That happened. They then made a signing earlier today. I'm recording this on Monday. They made a signing earlier today with Tobias Harris. We've also seen a few other Pistons targets that we've been hearing about sign other places. That also impacts the Pistons. There's been a lot of stuff happening over the last few days, and from my understanding, expect more things to happen. Obviously, the Pistons still have some cap space left. We'll talk about that later. There's a lot we're going to talk about, but first place we're going to start with is obviously the Detroit Pistons hiring their new head coach. It is JB Bickerstaff. He is the former head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was just fired earlier this offseason. So the Detroit Pistons have decided to not go with the new young assistant coach who has not had a head coaching job yet. It sounded like it was going to be between Sean Sweeney and Mike Nori, but they did not go that route. They did go with JB Bickerstaff. And I do have to say an apology to Woj, because I believe 2 weeks ago I said I don't believe Bickerstaff actually is in the running. I think that's more Woj giving a favor to one of his guys. Because what I was hearing was that it was between Sean Sweeney and Michael Nori. Those were the favorites. But obviously, Woj knew something we didn't, obviously. And JB Bickerstaff gets the role as the head coach. So my overall thoughts on this are, what I would have preferred, Kuka Hill, I would have probably went with a new young head coach. That doesn't mean this was the wrong decision. Let me say that real clearly. I do not think that this was the bad decision. I would just have, if it was me, I probably would have went with Sean Sweeney or Chris Quinn. That's who I've been targeting. I would have really loved Chris Quinn, but that probably would have been the route I went. However, again, that doesn't mean that this was a bad hiring. They went with the former head coach, and I have seen that some of the concern from the fan base has been, you went with Stan Van Gundy. That was someone already who had been a coach. You went with Dwayne Casey, guy who was fired that offseason, you signed him. You went with Monty Williams. That was a guy who was fired that offseason, you signed with him. Now it's another, I don't like using the retread, but another former head coach who was recently fired. Let's just keep it at that. You bring them in instead of going for a new face. I understand the concern there. However, I don't think it's fair to say just because it didn't work with, could you even say it didn't work with Dwayne Casey? I feel like his whole role changed. But if you want to say it didn't work with Dwayne Casey, okay. I don't know if you can say just because it didn't work with Dwayne, just because it didn't work with Monty, means that it then will not work with JB Bickerstaff. I don't think that's fair to him. JB Bickerstaff, over his years with Cleveland, started out 22-50, then went 44-38, then went 51-31, and this past season went 48-34, and took the Cleveland Cavaliers to the second round of the playoffs this past year, despite the injuries that they had. They had major injuries during the year to all of their main guys. Darius Garland had an injury. I think Evan Mobley was the only one. Actually, Evan Mobley got hurt too, didn't he? I was going to say I thought Evan Mobley was the only one who didn't get hurt, but now that I think about it, I think he also got hurt. Yeah, he also got hurt this year. So Jared Allen got hurt. Garland got hurt. Mitchell got hurt. Mobley got hurt. They dealt with injuries across the board in Cleveland, and he still got them to the playoffs. And without all of their guys, they made it to the second round of the playoffs despite that. So that is the positive there. He clearly helped build a culture in Cleveland. I think that much you can not disagree with. Cleveland was struggling when he got there, and under him, they went from a struggling team to a team that is consistently in the playoffs, has a really good young core, and I would say probably overachieved this past year with all the injuries they had. Peaked 2 years ago at 51 wins. But I think they overachieved this past year. And I think if all their guys stayed healthy, I think maybe you're talking about the Cavs a little bit differently. And heck, maybe they don't fire him if all of them get hurt or don't get hurt. So that's the positive there. He's still a relatively young coach. He's only 45 years old. So it's not like they got some old coach. Still relatively young coach who has experience in the division. And I would say I think it would be fair to say had a good resume with Cleveland over the last 4 years. So that's the positive there. The potential negative with Cleveland or with JB Bickerstaff is that in Cleveland towards the end, it sounds like, according to reports, he lost the locker room. It sounds like that a lot of players, according to reports, sound like a lot of players stopped believing in his philosophy, stopped believing in his on-court strategy. Specifically, it sounds like his offensive strategy. Players weren't buying into it, and it sounds like they maybe tuned his voice out this past year, and they were ready to get him out. So that's the only. I think that maybe not the only. There is some concerns about, from what I've seen. Now we're going to have Locked On Cavs host on this week to talk further with him about JB Bickerstaff. But from what I've read from those in Cleveland, his offensive creativity is something to monitor. And then also, obviously, the fact that he lost the locker room, it sounds like, at the end of his time in Cleveland. Now, the concern there, I don't think he's coming into this team and you have to be worried about him not getting the locker room initially. I don't think that's the concern. I trust that to happen, and he comes with a resume. So I think players will respect him immediately. I think the concern is, from what I understand, from what I've read and what I've heard, is that is he like a Dwayne Casey type, it seems like, where the concern with Casey was initially the voice is well received and everyone buys in, but it wears thin as the time goes on. It sounds like that's the concern with Bickerstaff. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't think this was a bad hiring. I completely understand the hiring. I understand wanting to go with somebody a little bit more experienced. I thought he did a good job in Cleveland. Maybe not a great one, but I thought he did a good one, especially with the injuries this past year. I think he helped set a culture there, which I think is what they're looking for from this head coach they were looking for. It was who can help establish this culture. Trajan has talked about how they need a culture badly, and I agree. So it seems like they believe that JB Bickerstaff can really establish that culture in Detroit over the next few years. So I guess where I stand, I'm kind of in the middle. I don't really feel strongly great about it. I don't feel strongly bad about it either. I'm more so in the, okay, I understand. Let's see how this plays out. I see both sides, the concerns potentially. I also see the pros to it. So I don't really have a strong opinion either way with that. I want to have an open mind, be fair to the guy, and see how he does. I think he's shown some good things. There's some things to watch for, potentially, his offensive creativity. And see, does his voice eventually run thin with the locker room in a few years? Is that something that actually does happen, or was it just something that happened in the Cleveland locker room? One thing I was told over the weekend by someone, let's just leave it as a source, that every locker room is different. Every locker room is a different locker room, a different personalities across the board. So maybe it was just that Cleveland locker room that he, lost the favoritism of, or the people stopped listening to. Every locker room is different. So maybe that doesn't happen to Detroit. Who knows? Maybe it is something concerned about. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just that particular locker room. So I think you got to give him a fair shot. I think there's very, very clearly pros to look to about this. So yeah, I'm more so just in the, okay, let's see what he does. I understand it. I get it. It was, by the way, I probably should have led with this. It's a 5-year deal, but according to James Edwards III, it's a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option on it. Woj didn't include the 5th-year option when he reported it. So we'll see which one. I'm going to go trust what James said. But either way, a 4 or 5 year deal. If it's a 5-year deal, it's an option on the last one. I think I said player option. Did I say a player option? I meant a team option on the last one. But either way, that's what they went with. They hired JB Bickerstaff. I don't think it's a bad hire at all. I understand the concerns some fans have at it, but I don't think it's a bad hiring at all. Let's just see what he does. So, what's your guys' thoughts on it? Do you guys like it? Do you guys dislike it? Was there another coach you guys would have rather had? Just let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I will say this before we wrap up. I would probably feel even more confident if they went with like an offensive guru at assistant coach. Because that is the one thing I've read repeatedly from some Cleveland guys, is that the offensive creativity was something that some players voiced their concerns about. So if that is a concern, if that's something that actually is, something to be worried about, if they went and hired an offensive-minded assistant coach to really help run the offense, I think that would be really splendid. But we'll see how they go. So, again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill what you guys think about this. The Detroit Pistons bring back Tobias Harris. Was this a good signing? Was this an overpay? Let's talk about it. I love sports. I grew up playing them. I grew up watching them. I love sports to this day, obviously. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have winded down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets at any time when I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer today. I've told you guys many times. A few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I tried out FanDuel. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know anything about it. I tried out FanDuel, and I have not turned back since. FanDuel is absolutely amazing. Super self-explanatory. A lot of fun and easy to use. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and again, start making the most out of your summer. That's what FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So next thing that happened over the weekend, actually it happened today. It wasn't the weekend. It was Monday, early Monday. The Detroit Pistons signed Tobias Harris. They signed him to a 2-year, $52 million deal, which means it's going to be a $26 million annual contract. Now, we haven't gotten the exact, we just got a notification. Okay, the Orlando Magic just got Batazzi back. That was someone I thought the Pistons could potentially be looking at, but he just returned to Orlando on a 3-year deal. So that's another guy off the board that I thought maybe the Pistons could go after. But let's move on with Tobias. Tobias signed a 2-year, $52 million deal. Now, we don't have the exact specifics of it yet. It sounds like, from what I understand, there is not a team option on the last year. But more so, we don't have the specifics right now, at least from what I've seen, whether maybe the contract's front-loaded or maybe the contract's back-loaded. Like, we're assuming that it's just 26 a year, but maybe they could have front-loaded in the first year and then not as much in the second year, or maybe back-loaded where there's more than the second year. Who knows? Or maybe not back-loaded is a little bit incorrect. That's incorrect. Maybe it's like 25 to 27 or 27 to 25. That's what I mean. Not that you could do like a 10-year in the first year and then 30 in the final year. That's not what I meant. Is it like descending? Is it ascending? Or is it just 26 across both years? We don't really know yet. Either way, though, I think this is a really good deal for the Detroit Pistons. I don't fully understand why there's some people upset about this deal. I've been very consistent in my thoughts about them going after Tobias. First of all, I've said for like months that you might as well just pencil in Tobias Harris coming to Detroit. I have heard for months, going all the way back to like November, that he wants to be in Detroit. He has ties to Detroit. He still comes back to Detroit. I've been telling you guys for months to just pencil in his salary, whatever it is, coming back to the Pistons. And for what it's worth, before I go even further into my thoughts, James Edwards III did tweet out that according to, where is it? Sure, I had this up already. The John Hollinger's, what is it pronounced? Board money projection that he has, the formula he has, had Tobias at around $26 million contract wise. So it sounds like the Pistons did, or not sounds like, according to his formula, the Pistons did get a fine deal on Tobias's contract. But I've been very consistent with, as long as the Pistons keep it short term, it's a good deal. Whether they overpay him massively over the 2 years just to get to the salary cap floor for these 2 years, whether it's just to overpay him so they could potentially attach one of the young guys to his contract that use that bigger contract to match salaries next year, whatever it is, as long as it was a short-term contract, there really isn't a downside to the contract. If it was a 3-year plus deal, then I'm a bit concerned. I'm definitely worried about what the money looks like. I've said that all along. If it was longer than 3 years, I'm going to be concerned about what the money looks like. The money better not be a high number if it's a long-term deal. If it's a short-term deal, you can overpay him some. Because like I said, you still keep your flexibility. He's still coming off the books relatively soon before guys' contract extensions, potentially an Ivy or a Duran or, he's coming off the books before those guys. We'll see if those guys are still on the roster come the season. But if they are, like, he's coming off the books before then, it's a short-term deal. He's not stopping anything from happening. And again, like I've mentioned numerous times, you need bigger salaries to attach to younger assets on smaller deals to match salaries. You need those contracts. And the fact that it is a short-term contract makes it even more appealing to other teams when you do start talking trades, if they do decide to try a trade Tobias mid-season or maybe next year. So I don't really see what the problem is with this contract. Unless you just think Tobias sucks and he just shouldn't be in the NBA, he just shouldn't have a contract. I'm not sure what the downside to the contract is. Again, if it was a longer term contract, I completely would understand. I would not have been a fan of that either. But a 2-year deal, like, I think that's perfect. I think that's exactly what you would want out of this type of deal. I think that's what everyone should have wanted out of this deal, was just a 2-year deal. Now, whether he resigns after the 2-year deal on a much cheaper contract just to remain in Detroit and be a vet presence, that could happen. But for this contract, I don't see what the problem is. Tobias, we've talked about Tobias a lot. He provides immediately what this team needs offensively. I've said this many times, I don't understand the hate towards Tobias Harris. It's not his fault that Philadelphia decided to pay him like a superstar. Yeah, he's not a superstar. He's not an all-star. But he's a fine starter. He's a good player. This idea that Tobias is just like a bad player because he was overpaid by the Sixers, I don't get it. I've said these numbers many, many times before, but we'll go through the numbers again. On spot-up possessions, 238 possessions this past year. 80th percentile, very good. Transition, 226 possessions. 70th percentile, very good. Post-up, 153 possessions. 71st percentile, very good. As an isolation scorer, 138 possessions. 59th percentile, good. On cuts, 78 possessions. 68th percentile, very good. On handoffs, 69 possessions. 53rd percentile, good. On putbacks, 63 possessions, 55th percentile, good. If you go over to what he shot on all catch and shoot jumpers just this past year, he was in the 50th percentile. On unguarded ones, he was at 52nd percentile. On off the dribble jump shots, 44th percentile. And around the rim, he's an average finisher. And this is this past year. This past year wasn't the greatest year for him. If you go to the previous year, I believe the catch and shoot numbers are much better for him. Yeah, if you go to the previous year, he's at 74th percentile as a catch and shooter, according to Synergy. So the previous year, he's at 74th percentile. You go the year before that, he's in the 58th percentile. So he's been a consistent player. Like, he can score in a lot of different ways. Defensively, he's not what, from what I've talked with a few people in Philadelphia. From what I understand, this past year, he was not as good on defense. 2 years ago, he was pretty good on defense, and he's been a consistently fine defender besides this past year. Now, the question will be, was he not good defensively this past year because of everything going on in Philadelphia? Is it because of role? Was he unhappy? Or was it because he simply can't give it on defense anymore and he's getting up there in age? We'll see. I don't think it's that because he's not that old. He's not like 34. Like, I think he can be, I'm not saying he can be like a really plus defender. That's not what I'm saying at all. But do I think he can be a passable one? Yeah, I think that just comes down to him giving a little bit more effort. So I think he shouldn't be asked to do as much. I think that had a lot to do with it too. Once Embiid went down, he was asked to have a bigger role, and that's not what you want from Tobias. So if he has a lesser role, you hope that he can give more effort on defense. He's a good shooter. He's a good scorer. He can score a multitude of ways. And if he can get back to being, I know this past year is at 35% from deep, but the previous 3 seasons, he was sitting at 38.3% from deep. You probably would like to see him raise that volume a little bit, get closer to 5 attempts like he was in 2020. But like this is my overall point is this is a good player. Is he like changing everything for the Pistons? No. Is he going to take them to the playoffs? No. Like, is that signing changing the franchise? No. But was it a good signing? Yeah. Did you get a good player? Yeah. Should you be better with him on the floor than you were last year? Yeah. Like, Tobias is a good basketball player. Is he an all-star? No. Should he be paid like an all-star? No. Was he paid like an all-star? At least according to Hollinger's formula, he was not. I would say no. I don't think $26 million is all-star money. I think that's probably like plus starter money. I think there's an argument you can make that he is a above average starter in the NBA. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say at all. Again, this is a guy over the last 4 seasons. He's averaging 17 points a game, 50% from the field, 38% from deep, and 87% from the free throw line. Like, I truly don't get why people hate Tobias. He was overpaid. He was asked to do a little too much this past year because Embiid was hurt, and he didn't show up in the playoffs this past year. So what? Like, the Pistons aren't going to the playoffs soon. They also aren't going to be asking him to be the second option for a team that's trying to be like a top 3 seed. Oh, and also he had a 58.4 true shooting percentage the last 4 years. Like, he's an efficient scorer. Again, my biggest issue would have been if it was a long-term contract. It was not. It's a short-term deal. It's a very flexible contract. You can get out of it. You can trade it. You can keep it. And nothing stops you from it doesn't stop you from doing anything. It's a really good contract, short-term deal. And he's a player that helps along with that on the court, but in the locker room. He's a good veteran. Players like him. And he wants to be in Detroit. Not a lot of these players probably even want to be in Detroit. Let's keep it a buck. They probably don't want to be here. Tobias wants to be here. He wants to be a veteran. He wants to be good in the locker room for these guys. He wants to be here. And he's a good player. They didn't overpay long-term money. They didn't give him a long-term contract. I truly don't see what the downside is to this contract. I can't find it. I don't know what the downside is. They could even flip this contract at the deadline because it's only going to be a year and a half left on it on a good contract. I don't really. What's the downside? I need someone to explain me what the downside to that deal. Doesn't mean you have to love it. Like, I'm not saying it was like the best deal ever, but it certainly wasn't a bad one. At the very least, it's just like, okay, that's fine. That makes sense. Like, I don't understand the people who just don't like it and just think it was bad. Like, I need that argument presented to me because I don't see any possible downside to it right now. Unless he just gets, I'm not even going to speak that out loud. Knock on wood. Not even going to say that. But hopefully that, let's just move past that. I don't see the downside. So let me know in the comment section down below if you're one of the people who see a downside to it. I'd love to hear what it is. But if you also like the contract, you like this signing, let me know why in the comment section down below or over on Twitter @KookHill. As of July 1st, 6:07 p.m., the Pistons have not made any other signings. If I am correct, the Pistons have $24 million left in cap space, and they have a mid-level exception they can also offer out. That's what they have left, if my calculations are correct. I believe they are. That's what they are left. Is there anything else coming for the Detroit Pistons in free agency? So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel @Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, you guys see me looking down my phone a lot. I keep getting notifications. I just want to make sure I'm not. You guys know how stressed I begin about this. I don't want to miss a potential trade or signing that happens. while we're recording. So that's why I keep looking down at my phone. Anyways, is there anything else coming for the Detroit Pistons in free agency? What am I hearing? What do I know right now? So I'll give you guys everything I can tell you guys right now. So I do think that there's more coming for the Pistons. I think both trades and free agent signings, I should say, are still on their way. I won't be surprised at all if they do both, a trade and a free agent signing, or two. I think they are still. I think there is a potential for the Pistons to do a move that no one's really seeing coming. I think Trajan likes to play a lot of things close to the chest, so I won't be surprised if they go and do something that no one's hearing about. With that said, there was a tweet put out by Keith Smith, NBA. We've had him on the podcast, obviously salary cap guru, Spotrac. I don't know if was he the creator of Spotrac or is he just the main guy at Spotrac? Either way, salary cap guru. He tweeted out the top free agents left remaining by position. And I'm not going to go through every single position, the guys on this list. However, I will tell you guys the few names that I know that the Pistons could potentially be signing. So I'm going to bring those names up. I'd love to hear from you guys. Of these names I mentioned, which one would you guys rather have? But these are the names that I would pay attention to, potentially the Pistons going after. These are the names. Buddy Hield, Gary Trent Jr., Gary Harris, Luke Kennard, Tyus Jones. I'd pay attention to those 5 guys. Now, I don't think Tyus Jones is likely. I think he'll get a good payday. I don't think the Pistons want to commit that type of money. Though I think they're in the market for a backup point guard as well. So that's why just, keep an eye on him. But Buddy Hield, Gary Trent Jr., Gary Harris, and Luke Kennard, I will not be shocked to see the Pistons sign one of those guys. So moving forward, yes, I think the Pistons are going to make another free agent signing. I think they're probably going to make 2 more free agent signings. That's my prediction right now. Along with that, I do think they're still going to try to get trades for future assets. You may be asking me, Koo, or you guys may be saying, Koo, how are they going to do that if they use their cap space with signing 2 more guys? Well, 2 answers. One, they could not sign those guys and use the entirety of that cap space left. Mind you, remember, they still have that exception. But they could use the entirety of that cap space to absorb a contract to get assets. But like I've said to you guys before, I've been going through FanDuel every single day, trying to find trades of guys on contracts that the Pistons could potentially get assets for. There's not many. I thought maybe potentially getting on that 3-team deal with Klay Thompson and potentially getting a Josh Green was on the board to help the Mavs. They didn't get in on that. Andrew Wiggins with Golden State, whatever happens there, I think that's a potential spot to watch for. Maybe New York, because it sounds like they might be trying to shed salary. But I question just what salary are they moving, and are they really interested in giving up legit assets to just shed that salary? Not sure about that. So I just don't see the opportunities out there unless something surprising comes out. I just don't see that many opportunities out there for that, to absorb a contract of a good player who's maybe overpaid and still get assets with it. I don't see that many opportunities, but maybe it does happen. Not ruling it out, obviously. That could still be the case, and they don't sign anybody else. Maybe they use the mid-level to get someone else, but maybe that's what they do. The second option is, and I'm going to tell you guys to pay attention to this too, is that they use the cap space to sign some free agents, and they trade some of the young guys to get future assets. We've heard Isaiah Stewart's name in the trade market. If they do get a starting center, which I believe that they're still trying to acquire and go after, potentially. Can you keep Stu and Duren together? I don't think so. I think they want to play Stu at the backup 5, or Stu would like to be the backup 5. I think that's his best position. So you can't play him and Duren if you go get another center. So I do think eventually one of those guys could be traded. And I would just point out Jane Ivey could be traded because they acquired THJ. not just because of THJ, like, let me finish before everyone loses their mind. THJ, and because the names I just mentioned that they could be signing play his position as well. Also, is Jaden Ivey a Trajan Langdon type of guy, a type of prospect? Maybe he is, but I'm not sure. So I'm just throwing it out there that, yes, they could still use their cap space to acquire assets. 100%, that's still on board. 100%. What's on the board as well is that they use the cap space to sign free agents and then move one or two of the young guys to get future assets to either one, draft a guy that's a trade that is Trajan's draft, or use those assets eventually in the future, whether it's this deadline, whether it's this offseason still, to go acquire guys that Trajan wants. Like that, those are the two routes I think are very much on the board. I wouldn't be shocked with either one happening, but I don't think the Pistons are done at all. I do think there's still free agent signings that they could be making, and I do think either or in the trade market is possible still. We'll see what happens. Again, I think Trajan plays a lot of things close to the chest, so who knows? Maybe there's a big surprise coming, but that's everything I can give you guys right now. Take it or leave it. Feel me? That's all I can give you guys now. If there's anything more I can give you guys, before I leave for vacation next week, obviously I will give you guys everything I know. But that's it as of right now. We'll see what happens with the Detroit Pistons. What do you guys think is going to happen next for the Pistons? More free agent signings, a trade. Who do you guys think you guys go after? Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. To wrap up the podcast, I do want to let you guys know, like I just alluded to, I will be going out of country on Friday. I will be gone from July 5th to July 10th. So I will be pre-recording some episodes to schedule out during those days. Tell me what you guys want to hear about. Obviously, they're going to be pre-recorded, so any new trades or signings that happen during that time, I won't be able to post an episode for. So what would you guys like to hear me talk about and record about for those episodes during those times? I do want to, make some interesting episodes for you guys during that time if I can't be here for a potential big trade that happens or a big signing. So let me know that in the comment section down below as well, or over on Twitter at Kukio. But I more so just want to give you guys that notification. I'm going to continue to notify you guys that in the future episodes, I will be leaving at the end of this week and we'll be gone from the 5th to the 10th. So if you guys are wondering why you guys don't have any update for me, it's because of that. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free to available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.